Welcome into Duval Daily, presented by GenJag.com. I'm Jordan DeLugo. Thanks so much for being here. Tuesday, April 15th, Jaguars pre-draft press conference. The first one featuring James Gladstone and Liam Coen. First pre-draft press conference, that is, featuring the top two guys in the Jaguars organization from a football standpoint. Gladstone being the new GM and Liam Coen being your new head coach. They talked about this year's draft. I thought it was awesome, honestly. And that's not just to blow smoke or anything like that. I thought it was really good hearing what they were willing to share, hearing what they weren't willing to share, speaking more about James Gladstone a little bit there. And I thought there was some really enlightening thoughts and ideas kind of shared here. So we're just going to dive into it. This is somewhat in order from start to finish a little bit. And just kind of my top takeaways, what I thought about some of the things they said. So I'm excited to get into it. Really appreciate y'all tuning in, supporting this channel. It is draft season, which is my favorite time of year outside of actual real football. And sometimes that's not too fun when you're covering and following the Jacksonville Jaguars on a yearly basis. But getting into this press conference, James Gladstone was asked about top 30 visits last time. When Liam Coen was available, James Gladstone wasn't available. I think that was just last week. Hard to keep track of time at this point. But Liam Coen was asked about not having top 30 visits, and the phrasing top 30 visit really doesn't make sense anyways. It's just a visit, right? It's just a facility visit, as James Gladstone called it today. But James Gladstone kind of answered why he and where he comes from, the Los Angeles Rams, doesn't value the top 30 visits, right? He mentioned strategy, right? Like, if you have these visits, it is a data point that the public and that other teams can pick up on and study and monitor, not only for this year, but over the years, right? If you are a team that gives off any indicators via the top 30 visits over a span of years, of off seasons, that can negatively impact your process, right? It can give indicators, whether it's positive, negative, whatever it may be, to other teams, to the public, of what your process is when it comes to drafting players. And you don't want that. So he mentioned strategy. He mentioned scouts studying these guys on and off the field for years. He mentioned sourcing information from those close to these guys, it could be from early on in their football careers, their hometowns, college, whatever it may be. They source a lot of information and they rely on that information. And then they also lean on those processes and some other processes that James Gladstone was not willing to talk about, because he thinks it might lessen their competitive advantage if he goes into all those things, right? He thinks that they have a process that gives them a competitive advantage. He's not willing to divulge all the information, which I like. They lean on all those processes, some of the ones mentioned and some of the ones that are not mentioned, over a 1 hour in-person visit. And he also talked about going through this entire process that they have in place is going to be more valuable than trying to dissect who a person is in 1 hour. And then that 1 hour that you have with a player, if it comes towards the end of the process, can also lead into implicit bias. Like, the last person you visit with could leave a more lasting impression just because it's more recent. And so there's a lot of different things that go into the Jaguars not hosting top 30 visits. I, for one, really liked his answers regarding that. I think that it's smart. I really do. And I think that overall it's something that hopefully does give the Jaguars a competitive advantage. And so he was asked to divulge more about the process than what I just identified and than what he initially identified. And again, just said he likes to keep some of that things in-house because of the competitive advantage. And the sourced information and tape tells them a lot about the players that they're looking at, not only from a physical standpoint, but from a mental standpoint. So they have a lot of different data points in that regard. He talked about kind of getting the entire scouting staff under one roof for the first time since he's been here, because the scouting staff is all over the place during the pre-draft process. You're talking about the college all-star games, Senior Bowl, all that stuff. Then you're talking about the combine, you're talking about pro days. All these things are highly valuable, and you've got scouts all across the country flying all over the place. They finally have the scouts in the building right now, all of them together, and he's really excited about that because he kind of wanted the guys to come in and have more of this water cooler talk versus reading from a scouting report that they've put together. He wanted these guys to be prepared to just talk versus reading from your notes, right? And he felt like they were incredibly prepared, the scouting staff, to do that. And he feels like they're headed in a really good direction with the scouting staff and kind of taking what they know and putting a James Gladstone, a Jaguars spin on how things will be viewed moving forward. He also talked about adaptability, preparing for different outcomes within the draft. He says a lot of times when you press that button, the enter button, on a pick, right then whether it's the right pick or not. And he and Liam Coen and a lot of the staff, they have been going through exercises on a daily basis almost where they have a certain situation that takes place in the draft and they have to simulate pressing the enter button. And then they sleep on it and they get back to talking to each other the next day. And that kind of helps them throughout their process as well. They're trying to treat all these opportunities that they're giving themselves via these practice reps, he kind of called them, as if they are real reps, as if it's the real draft. So I think the way they're preparing for this is excellent. He's constantly talked about and asked about intangibly rich. And he says that's not a quote that comes from or a phrasing that comes from the Rams. It's just something that he kind of said. It came to his mind during his first press conference, and he's kept up with it because he believes in it. And so when it comes to intangibly rich, he said, I have in my mind what intangibly rich means. Y'all have the same thing. It's not like some crazy secret, but he did say mental and physical toughness are maybe the biggest aspects of intangibly rich. And they will always start personnel decisions with that intangibly rich part of it, and mental and physical toughness being at the forefront of that. And they feel that throughout all their different processes, they can identify pretty well mental and physical toughness and intangibly rich people. What goes into intangibly rich beyond that mental and physical toughness part of it, he didn't exactly divulge, but if I had to guess, because again, he said you have the idea in your head, and my thoughts would be beyond mental and physical toughness, like what type of energy do you bring? Is it a positive energy? Which doesn't mean you have to be this high intensity guy or you have to be this chill person. I think it just means being yourself, but as long as being yourself gives a positive energy to those around you, that's going to be a intangibly rich person. And then also just the work ethic part of it. I think work ethic is going to be huge. I think energy is going to be huge. And then the mental and physical toughness part of it that they talked about a lot today is obviously at the forefront of what they're doing here. Now, Liam Coen, he talked about some interesting things from a personnel perspective. He, when asked about the wide receiver class, and this isn't a direct quote, but he, in summary, basically said he feels like there's guys that can be yak guys. There's guys that can get up and down the field. There's some guys that can be 50-50 ball winners. But there wasn't like that sparkling prospect at the top of the draft necessarily that you've seen in other years. I think you could probably look back to last year as a reference point, as a data point to what Liam Coen is talking about with Marvin Harrison Jr., with Rome Odunze, Malik Neighbors, even Brian Thomas Jr., who may end up being just about as good or better than any of those guys for the Jaguars. I don't think he thinks there's that level of talent, but maybe later on there's some guys, and later on could mean 36 overall. It could mean 70, 88, whatever it may be, right? So it did seem to indicate that Liam Coen thinks maybe the depth of this class is better than the very top end at wide receiver, which would also seem to indicate that they're probably not going to be taking a Tetero McMillan at 5 overall, or in a trade down scenario, potentially maybe they're not taking a wide receiver, probably going to be more focused on trench play. If I had to guess, I could also potentially see cornerback if they don't feel like they have an outside corner opposite Tyson Campbell. If they feel like, we love Jordan Lewis, we don't really know what we have in Jarian Jones, maybe Will Johnson is a perfect fit at 9 overall. We don't know. And speaking of Will Johnson and a lot of these other guys that haven't been testing lately, a lot of top prospects just don't test anymore for whatever reason. Maybe it's a little nick here, a little injury there. Maybe it's just they don't want to test for whatever reason. But he said, testing can be helpful when you're just comparing a prospect to a prospect. You have that testing data, that data point, right? But data tracking on field has come a long way in recent years. And for them, that's going to weigh much differently than a 40-yard dash. He didn't say much more. He said much differently. To me, what I glean from that, what I take away from that, is that on-field testing matters a lot more than a 40-yard dash, because on-field testing is on-field data is what's actually happening in between the lines, in between the whistles. Like, that's what's actually impacting football versus running as fast as you can in a straight line for 40 yards without pads on. And I appreciate that. I love that. A 40-yard dash is fun. Do I care more about a 40-yard dash or how fast someone is running on the field in a specific situation that's actually a football situation? I think the answer should be pretty obvious. So getting back to Liam Coen, as I got off on that tirade a little bit, I don't even know how I got to the Gladstone part of it, but he was also asked about edge. So he talked about an edge, edge 3 probably. Trayvon Walker, Josh Hines-Allen, those are your top guys. But an edge 3 that they're looking for, someone who can set the edge, which means play the run, disciplined, play the run, and play with strength and length. And he said, you don't have to be 6'4", 260 to be able to play that way. We're not necessarily looking for that. We're just looking for someone who can do the job on base downs. So it's not just a DPR type of player, according to Liam Coen, that they're going to be looking for as their edge 3 or a depth edge player, whatever you want to call it, but also someone who potentially provides a different pass rush plan, a changeup, and someone who can burn up the edge is what he said, which to me sounds like a speed rusher, right? A little bit of a speed rusher. Finding a speed rusher who can also set the edge at a high level can be a bit of a difficult task, right? It's not every day that you have somebody who sets an edge against the run at a high level, but also can burn up the edge. You don't always have that guy. So they might have to settle for somewhere in between, one of the two, etc. But that's kind of what they're looking for, at least in an edge. And I don't think that comes as a big surprise, but it was interesting to hear him talk about kind of the edge prospects that they're going to be looking at. Can they find somebody that they think can do that as an edge 3? Because look, pass rush depth is critical. We've seen it in this league over the years. Almost every single time you see a team in the Super Bowl winning it, they have pass rush in waves, or they have dynamic pass rushers. And I think the Jaguars could use one more edge rusher and certainly potentially an interior rusher as well to really get this thing going. Liam Coen, a couple times now, he's referenced as kind of one of the biggest adjustments to being a head coach versus being an offensive coordinator, the special teams part of it, just from a coaching standpoint and roster building and the draft. So like he's always having to think about special teams right now, get input from James Gladstone, Heath Farwell, these guys about what special teams kind of does for the team. And so bottom of the roster, you've got to go get guys that have that special teams value. I think that he's certainly very aware of that now, being a head coach. James Gladstone asked about kind of how they're feeling about where they're at in the draft. And he said he feels really good about the pod of players they're discussing at the top with their first pick, and realizes the importance of the first pick for the new regime. Like, this new draft class is important, right? Every draft class is important, but putting a stamp on your first off season as the GM, as the head coach, it's a critical point. And even more critical is that first pick, because those are usually the guys that really can change things for an organization, that can help elevate what you have, help send you on a different trajectory. And so they've got to hit on that guy. They've got to find a really good player. So Gladstone likes the pot of players that they're discussing at the top. He likes the message that any of those prospects from that pod that they're looking at would send to the locker room, send to the fan base, and the greater football landscape about who the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to be moving forward. I thought those were some very strong words from James Gladstone. Similar to the 30 visits, they did not do a local pro day. Similar mindset as the top 30 visit situation. He said they would rather spend that energy in a different way, right? So if you're going to host a local pro day, does it A, take away from your strategy, your competitive advantage? B, is it the most effective use of energy? I think that's fair. Liam Coen was kind of asked about Brian Thomas Jr. and the offense and said they have to spread it around. Teams are going to want to try to cloud him at times. They have to try to keep teams honest so they can keep getting Brian Thomas Jr. the ball in advantageous ways. And he talked about specific players he thinks they are going to spotlight outside of Brian Thomas Jr. And he mentioned Parker Washington, De'Ami Brown, Brenton Strange, and the two backs, Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby. Those are guys who are going to get the spotlight. Could that change based on what happens in the draft? I think so. But to me, that at least says, right, based on what he's seen on tape, he likes these guys. He likes Parker. He likes De'Ami. Obviously, they brought him in. He likes Brenton Strange and talked about Brenton Strange continuing that ascension. And he likes the two backs and their skill sets. I think that's very enlightening that he does like some of this skill position talent that they have outside of Brian Thomas Jr. They also touched on like character concerns, which character concerns can be different for everyone. Like, there might be reports about X player not being great off the field, not being good in the locker room, whatever it may be. The Jaguars are going to do their own homework, their own research, their own fact finding, and sourcing of information to determine that for themselves. But if they have a concern about someone's character, yeah, that's going to make it difficult for them to potentially add to this roster. So that's something to keep in mind. I don't think they're going to be taking shots on people that they don't feel comfortable with, people that they don't view as intangibly rich, which again is going to be mental and physical toughness, right? At the forefront of being intangibly rich. So that's going to do it here. Really appreciate y'all tuning in. If you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. Y'all have a good one.